to American Black Journal. I'm Stephen Henderson. For the first time, a diverse group of organizations is teaming up to improve K-12 education here in Michigan. The partnership is called Launch Michigan, and it will focus on student needs now and in the future.
Never before have we seen such a diverse group of organizations and partners come together to improve public education. We represent a very broad spectrum of business, education, philanthropy, community leadership, state leadership, and we're united behind one goal, which is to make sure that we have the best public education system in America so that our kids can succeed not only in their careers but also in life.
I'm particularly excited because, as you all know, our state has made a great recovery. We see lots of things that are going well in our state, but we know that what's happening in our state is not going to be resilient, nor will it be durable if we don't ask this question constant and often. How are the children? And this is a moment for us to ask ourselves, how are we doing for children and by children with our educational system? And when we look at that question, we know that we are not doing as well as we possibly can for children. And this gives us an opportunity to do it, where the opportunity is grounded in a coalition of people across the board, from business to philanthropy to community, and most importantly, our educators who bring passion for our children.
Joining me now are two members of the new Education Alliance, Brian Gutman from the Education Trust Midwest and Don Wotruba of the Michigan Association of School Boards. Welcome to American Black Journal.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Appreciate it.
So this is an issue that we've been talking about in Michigan for a really long time. I think most people are aware of at least some of the issues. Some people are aware, I think, of all of the things that are going on. I think one of the key questions, though, with a group like this is, where do you start? What is the sort of kickoff point for a discussion about what's wrong with our schools and how we fix it? Brian, I'll start with you.
One of the things that I think is so exciting about this effort is that we're really starting by coming around the table and talking about solutions rather than finger pointing. It has been far too long that we have been sliding as a state. It's not due to the actions or inactions of any one group around the table or otherwise, but it's a shared problem, and it's a shared problem that we really need to resolve.
Yeah.
So I think that's our starting point.
Yeah. Where do we start with the issues?
Well, I mean, I think a big thing in this is that we aren't going to try to solve all of the ills of public education in the system. We have to really look at this and say, what are some things that, you know, will be effective in Michigan to start moving the needle, and work towards those. And if we start getting momentum there, then we can add to those. And, you know, one thing we hear consistently, and parents would say this, no matter what community they're in, there is still great respect for teachers in the classroom. And we have to make sure, and one of the things the coalition has already started talking about is, what do we do to make sure our educators have the things and the tools that they need to serve our children well? And that's one of the focuses, and there'll be other focuses amongst those, but it's not trying to solve all things at once, because that would bog down and we would not be successful.
Right. At the same time, we've had a lot of different efforts to sort of take this piece of it or that piece of it and come up with a reform that we say is going to solve it. How does this sort of interact with those things? I mean, I'm thinking specifically like about the teacher accountability system that we keep sort of trying to get started in fits and starts. Do you just jettison that and start over, or do you try to mesh that up with this?
I think we're really starting from a point of identifying where there are gaps, where there are needs, whether that's on teacher support or equitable funding, and certainly there's an entire universe of things that we could talk about. We're not going to get to them all, but one of the intentions of this partnership is to make sure that when we do come out with our recommendations, when we do come together on whatever the set of priorities may be, that it has stability and durability, that we're no longer in the kind of circular place that we've sometimes found ourselves of putting a policy in place just to revisit and change it a couple of years down the road when political wills change.
School boards play a huge role, obviously, in education in the state. I'm curious what your members tell you about what they would like to see changed. Do school boards need more support? Do they need more training? which part of this affects them?
You know, I think they, as the governance body of school districts, they want to see their kids successful and their teachers successful. And so I think there's much less self-interest in what this means for school board members, but wanting to be, MASB to be a part of a coalition that is supporting public education in general. And I do think there are times where boards of education need to better themselves in an educational standpoint through training or otherwise, because they are an integral part of the leadership and broad vision of a district. And if they're not doing that well with their superintendent, it has ramifications right down the line to the teachers. So they kind of lead the culture in a school district. So that clearly is a piece of that. But for them in this coalition, it is supporting teachers, supporting public ed. Let's find solutions.
Yeah. Other states are ahead of us in terms of outcome, at least, in terms of the way that they have changed K-12 to produce better outcomes. Can you talk to me about some places that we ought to be looking, some places who are doing it not just right, but I guess just better than we are?
Sure. So there are many states, unfortunately, that are seeing stronger outcomes, stronger growth for their students, and certainly we want Michigan students, and Michigan students are absolutely more than capable of learning at high levels. All Michigan students, that's what we want. The types of places that we look at, and it certainly varies by the policy, are places like Massachusetts, which pretty much across the board outperforms most other states.
Everybody sort of agrees that's the national model.
Tennessee's another one to look at, but it's not just because they have strong outcomes or strong growth or policies that have gotten them there, but it's also because they've had coalitions in place that have maintained those changes over multiple administrations of differing political parties. And I think one of the challenges that we've seen in Michigan is the constantly changing nature of reform, that we really need to, when we make a change, and hopefully a really thoughtful, research-based change, when we make that change, that we actually stick with it.
Yeah. What took us so long to get this group around the table together, all sort of pulling in the same direction?
I've been in this for a long time, and I think we've had a lot of self-interest, whether it was education or business or whoever it was that wanted to solve education's problems. They came up with a solution and drove their solution regardless of what any other entity that was involved would say. And there just hasn't been that collaborative nature, but where we are today has shown that whatever those one-off solutions were really didn't solve any of the problems. And I think there's just a realization that if we don't do it together, we're never going to do it well. And so I think that is the place where just people have put aside self-interest to say other states have done this successfully when it was done together, and nobody has generally done it on their own.
Where's the parent voice in this? Parents, I think, see this in a very important way. They aren't always at the table to make a difference.
Yeah, it's going to be absolutely critical to have parent voices at the table, and as we're coming together for this table especially to be listening to parents in a wide range of communities across the state. That's something that we're still working on, exactly what all of that looks like, but I think that across the board and across the table, the various groups sitting together have recognized the importance of hearing what everyone else is saying. That has to include parents, that has to include educators, and we're really pleased to see such a diverse group of partners around the table that already have deep networks.
They're already connected
in their communities. Employers are also parents. Teachers are also parents, school board members, and there will be intentional efforts to make sure that the voice of the community, the voice of the parent, is absolutely heard and absolutely considered as this group moves forward.
Let's talk about timetable. That's another thing that I think parents are anxious about. How quickly might we see changes that they might want to see in their local school districts?
I think the coalition's goal right now is to be able to work hard this summer and come up with at least a handful of recommendations in the late fall, tying into the election cycle, to tell those elected in November, governor, legislative offices, here's what this coalition came along, and that'll be mid-school year. So we would really hope to see legislation enacted in the early 2019, so that next school year, a couple months from now, like maybe some changes will start happening.
Right. The legislature has always been a sticking point for these kind of things. They also seem to stick their nose in uninvited in a lot of cases and maybe in unhelpful ways. What makes you confident that things might go differently this time?
Well, what makes me optimistic that things might go differently this time is really the representation of the partners around the table. We've got great partners in business and education advocacy, in education management, in parents, philanthropy. It's really a broad group, and the teachers' unions are also at the table. The intention of this group, or a large intention, I should say, of this group, is to remove the partisan politics from the policies. There is absolutely no reason that public education should be a partisan issue, and far too often it is. By having such a diverse range of groups around the table, I think that we really can begin to roll that back and make sure that we're enacting policies that are really first thinking about, is this helping our students?
Yeah. Okay, well, congratulations, and we will look forward to the recommendations later this year.
Thank
you.
Stephen.
Thanks for being here.